that even sleep and food are really desires of the body. So he's not asking you not to sleep and not to eat. He's saying that the desire for that must go away. The body should not dictate terms to you. You should be master of your body. That's what it means meant. But granting that this cannot be done, the only way is to fix a rule of action outside ourselves, not dictated by anything in our subjectivity. So there is the normal interpretation which Srivamata does not agree with. Not dictated by anything in our subjectivity. It's not anything, any control from your vital or your mind, but fix something which has to be done regularly. Niyata, Nitya Karma of the Vedic rule. Now, Nitya Karma, Nitya means every day, okay? Eternally, Nitya Karma. So, every day you should sit for puja. That's what they are interpreting. The Vedic rule. And many Indian families still do that, okay? And they spend a lot of time also in that. Most of the Indian houses in the previous era, okay, they used to have a puja room. But nowadays, of course, with modern flats and all that, nobody is interested. But even then, if they are feeling religious, then they have a place, small place, where they keep photos of gods and worship. They do that, even in modern flats. So, the Vedic rule, the routine of ceremonial sacrifice, daily conduct and social duty, which the man, so daily conduct and social duty, which you are asked to do mechanically, which the man who seeks liberation may do simply because it is enjoined upon him. You are being asked to do it by society and family, so you do it without any personal purpose or subjective interest in them. Mechanically, he means with an absolute indifference. I've been asked to do, I'm doing. Okay. Not because he's compelled by his nature, but because it is enjoined by the Shastra. The Shastra is telling me to do that, so you do that. It's like children being advised to go to the ashram and go to the samadhi every day. If you go there to the samadhi every day mechanically and do that while thinking of something else, it has no value. That's what is being said. Maybe it has some very minimal value. You can't say it has no value at all, because the very habit, physical habit, may one day turn into a deeper value. So it's possible. When you go on doing something mechanically also, finally it bears its own fruit. Now I read the next sentence. But if the principle of the action is not to be external to the nature but subjective, if the actions even of the liberated and the sage are to be controlled and determined by his nature, swabhava niyatam, then the only subjective principle of action is desire of whatever kind. So, this is it. If you have to make it internal, then it becomes desire comes in of whatever kind. Even when I'm doing puja with the right spirit, it's a desire. I want something from the divine. So that's what Shandri is pointing out. It's then only the subjective principle of action is desire of whatever kind. Desire can be so many things. It can be for material gains, it can be for fame, it can be for even spiritual desire. I want liberation, even that is a desire. Lust of the flesh or emotion of the heart or base or noble aim of the mind, but all subject to the gunas of Prakriti. The gunas of Prakriti are the sattva, rajas, tamas, and when you are doing it with desire, then you are subject to the gunas, okay, sattva, rajas, tamas. But you have to become Traigunyamayi. You have to become Trigunatita. You have to go beyond the body-mind life for a spiritual life. So Srimad is saying, now Srimad is not saying, the one who is interpreting is saying, be very careful. Let us then interpret the Niyata Karma of the Gita as the Nitya Karma of the Vedic rule. By the way, you must be very careful when you are reading. In fact, I also got confused with the first time. Let us then interpret. Srimad is not saying. He is saying that the others who interpret mechanically and tell you to do action because the Veda is telling you to do, he is talking of them. So their argument is, let us then interpret the niyata karma of the Gita as the nitya karma of the Vedic rule. It's kartavya karma, that which has to be done. Whether subjectively or objectively is not being mentioned. Or work that has to be done as the Aryan rule of social duty. You're not doing for God, you're doing it as a social duty. And let us take too its work done as a sacrifice to mean simply these Vedic sacrifices and this fixed social duty performed disinterestedly and without any personal objective. Now, Seblo's comment. This is how the Gita's doctrine of desireless work is often interpreted. So they are not Seblo speaking. This is how the interpretation takes place. But now Seblo is saying, but it seems to me that the Gita's teaching is not so crude and simple, not so local and temporal and narrow as all that. You are asked to do the work that you are doing, what society gives you. That is absolutely the wrong interpretation of the Gita. It seems to me that the Gita's teaching is not so crude and simple, not so local and temporal and narrow as all that. It is large, free, subtle, profound. It is for all time and for all men, not for a particular age and country. Especially, it is always breaking free from external forms, details, dogmatic notions, and going back to principles and the great facts of our nation and our being. It is a work of large philosophic truth, not narrow, but spiritual practicality, not of constrained religious and philosophical formulas and stereotyped dogmas, fixed dogmas. It is not that. So the niyatam karma has to be interpreted as controlled action and not regular mechanical work which society is giving to you. That's what is being said. So now we can read the next para, and Pallavi has read and Shilpa has read. Now Kiran, you can read.
Yes, Sangana.
The difficulty is this.
The difficulty is this: how our nature, being what it is, and desire the common principle of its action. Is it possible to institute a really desireless action, or what we call ordinarily disinterested action is not really desireless? It is simply a replacement of certain smaller personal interest by other larger desires which have only the appearance of being impersonal, virtue, country, mankind. All action, moreover, as Krishna insists, is done by the gunas of Prakriti, by our nature. In acting according to the Shastra, we are still acting according to our nature. Even if this Shastric action is not as it usually is, a mere cover for our desires, prejudices, passions, egoisms, or personal, national, sectarian vanities, sentiments, and preferences, but even otherwise, even at the purest, still we obey a choice of our nature. And if our nature were different and the gunas acted on our intelligence and will in some other combination, we would not accept the Shastra, but live according to our pleasure or our intellectual notions, or else break free from the social law to live the life of the solitary or the ascetic. We cannot become impersonal by obeying something outside ourselves, for we cannot so get outside ourselves. We can only do it by rising to the highest in ourselves, into our free soul and self, which is the same and one in all, and has therefore no personal interest, to the divine in our being, who possesses himself transcendent of cosmos and is therefore not bound by his cosmic works or his individual action. That is what the Gita teaches, and desirelessness is only a means to this end, not an aim in itself. Yes, but how is it to be brought about? By doing all works with sacrifice as the only object, is the reply of the divine teacher. By doing works otherwise than for sacrifice, this world of men is in bondage to works. For sacrifice practice works, O son of Kunti, becoming free from all attachment. It is evident that all works and not merely sacrifice and social duties can be done in this spirit. Any action may be done either from the ego sense, narrow or enlarged, or for the sake of the divine. All being and all action of Prakriti exist only for the sake of the divine. From that it proceeds, by that it endures, to that it is directed. But so long as we are dominated by the ego sense, we cannot perceive or act in the spirit of this truth, but act for the satisfaction of the ego and in the spirit of the ego, otherwise than for sacrifice. Egoism is the knot of the bondage. By acting Godwards without any thought of ego, we loosen this knot and finally arrive at freedom.
Very big para, okay? And he is explaining what is meant by desireless action. Okay? Very often it is interpreted in this way that very often it is interpreted in this way that okay, it is interpreted in this way that suppose I am feeding poor people one day, 100 people I feed. On a puja day or my birthday, I feed 100 people. I am doing disinterested work. Okay, I am doing something for others, charity, okay, helping others. So this is supposed to be, I am not doing it for myself. I am doing it for the other person. So is this what is meant by desireless action? Same way discussing. Because very often charity, philanthropy, altruism, humanitarianism are all you are doing for the satisfaction of your own ego. So if the ego is there, your desireless action is impossible. So you have to, so how to do? So what is the solution? So Sharma is telling you the solution is do the work that you are doing, okay, as a sacrifice to the divine. That is the best way to get rid of your ego. Why? Just think about it little and you will see how interesting it is. If you do the work for the divine and not for yourself, okay, then you are constantly thinking of the divine and doing the action for him. The stress is on the divine and not for yourself. So slowly, the accent of the stress, the importance of what you're doing becomes for the divine and not for yourself. And if that is so, then naturally the ego starts becoming less and less offensive. And finally, it can even disappear. So that is what Shendra is explaining here in this paragraph. Okay. So you do it, the solution is do it with as a sacrifice. Do it for the Lord and not for yourself. The sacrifice, we have already discussed at great length. It is the doing of works not for oneself but for the divine. That is the sacrifice. You do everything, even your thoughts, even your vital emotions, even your physical things, even your actions. Everything is done as a sacrifice to the divine, giving it to him. Okay, so we have about 6-7 minutes, so nearly 8:30, but I'll go through it. This is basically what he's saying. So understand whatever he's saying in this way, that action in the physical world, if it is done mechanically, you interpret it as unattached, disinterested work. But Shraddha is explaining that disinterested work is not possible when your ego is there. Okay. So the solution is ego is there, but you do it for the divine. Slowly, the ego will get frayed and it will disappear. I'm reading each sentence. The difficulty is this: how our nature being what it is, and desire, the common principle of all action. If you look very carefully, whatever you are doing, it starts with a desire in the mind. There's a motive, there's a purpose. Is it possible to institute a really desireless action? Can any action be totally desireless? That's what he's asking. For what we call ordinarily disinterested action is not really desireless. It is simply a replacement of certain smaller personal interests by other larger desires which have only the appearance of being impersonal. Virtue, country, mankind. Okay, I am doing it for my country, but you take great pride in what you are doing. So that's the ego. Even when you are doing something for mankind, you feel that, look how wide I am. I'm doing it for mankind, not for myself. But it's the ego that is being satisfied. So to get rid of the ego, what's the problem? The solution? Again, sacrifice. All action, moreover, as Krishna insists, is done by the gunas of Prakriti. The individual soul is not the doer at all. It is the gunas of Prakriti, body, mind, life, controlled by universal nature. By our nature, it is being controlled. In acting according to the Shastra, we are still acting according to our nature. Even if the Shastric action is not, as it usually is, a mere cover for our desires, prejudices, passions, egoisms, our personal, national, sectarian vanities. Sectarian means very, very limited to a sect. Okay? A sect is a particular branch of life of a collection of people who have got very fixed ideas. Sectarian vanity, uselessness, vanity in the sense of useless, sentiments and preferences. But even otherwise, even at the purest, still we obey a choice of our nature, even when it is high. Okay? In other words, I am aspiring for a divine life. But even that is a desire. So ultimately, even the desire is given up. So that's why I'm saying it is impossible when you are in a normal consciousness to do absolutely desireless action. So there is a key to that. That's what is going on stressing. Okay? But even otherwise, even at the purest, still we obey a choice of our nature. And if our nature were different and the gunas acted on our intelligence and will in some other combination, we would not accept the Shastra, but live according to our pleasure or our intellectual notions, or else break free from the social law to live the life of the solitary or the ascetic. So that is what you would do. If you are asked to do controlled action and you realize that you cannot do controlled action, then you give up all action and go out of society. Live the life of the solitary and ascetic. Because if you go away, then the world is not there around you, and then desire may not come up. Okay, that's the whole idea. Some of us does not agree with the solitary and the ascetic. We cannot become impersonal by obeying something outside ourselves. For we cannot so get outside ourselves. We can only do it by rising to the highest in ourselves. And when you rise to the spiritual levels, in ourselves means into the interconscient or the superconscious, into our free soul and self, the level 2 of the spiritual consciousness, which is the same and one in all, and has therefore no personal interest, to the divine in our being, who possesses himself transcendent, cosmic, and is therefore not bound by his cosmic works or his individual action. So we have to do it in that way for the divine. And the divine is there everywhere, transcendent, cosmic, and individual. That is what the Gita teaches, and desirelessness is only a means to this end, not an aim in itself. Yes, but how is it to be brought about? How can you do it? Now the solution. By doing all works with sacrifice as the only object is the reply of the divine teacher. By doing works otherwise than for sacrifice, this world of men is in bondage to works. So if you do it without sacrifice, then the ego is always there and you are bound to what you are doing. There is no liberation. By doing works otherwise than for sacrifice, this world of man is in bondage to works. For sacrifice, practice works. If you want to do sacrifice, practice works. Do practical works. O son of Kurti, becoming free from all attachment. It is evident that all works and not merely sacrifice and social duties can be done in the spirit. Everything you can do, whatever you are doing. It doesn't matter what you are doing. Okay? Even sweeping the floor. Any action may be done either from the ego sense, narrow or enlarged, or for the sake of the divine. All being and all action of Prakriti exist only for the sake of the divine. If that's the way, then you will get liberation. From that it proceeds, by that it endures, to that it is directed. But so long as we are dominated by the ego sense, we cannot perceive or act in the spirit of this truth, but act for the satisfaction of the ego and in the spirit of the ego, otherwise than for sacrifice. So the problem is, egoism is a knot of the bondage. By acting Godwards without any thought of ego, we loosen this knot and finally arrive at freedom. The solution is think of God all the time and do everything for Him. Then the ego is slowly disappears. That's what he's saying. So today we stop here. At first, however, the Gita takes up the Vedic sutras. I'll make a note.
Yes, yes, Rangana.
Yes, you want to say something, Kiran?
Yes, yes. Intraconscient and supraconscient.
Yeah. Supraconscient is above the mind.
Above the mind, and intraconscient is
It's inside yourself, horizontal.
inside.
Yeah.
In that which is past and present, we have the access to past and present. In intraconscient,
In the intraconscient, what do you say? I didn't follow.
we have access to past and present in intraconscient.
Yes, memory, yes.
And it is linked to psychic being.
Yes,
Is
that's
it?
right. Yes,
Okay.
that's
That
right.
only I wanted to know.
But not only, no, if you go into your psychic intraconscient, you can also have a glimpse of the future also.
Okay.
It's only when we are in our normal consciousness that we can know only the past and present, not the future.
Means intraconscient, we can know future also.
You can, yes, to a certain extent. But when you go to the supraconscient, then the future also becomes clear.
And intraconscient is linked to psychic being.
Yes, it is not only psychic being, but there's a inner mind, there's an inner vital, and there's an inner physical being also. A subtle mind and a subtle vital and a subtle body. All that is also there in the intraconscient. Okay?
Okay.
It's deep inside yourself.
Indeed.
I've given you the image of a house. Then that
Yes,
will
yes. Yes.
make it very clear.
Yes, it makes very clear.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Have a nice day, Kiran.